Hello everyone, welcome to Liam's Lyceum. I'm your host Liam, aka Himbar, and today I am going to do a third video, third from recent readings, of recommended short stories. And I'm just going to briefly talk about these short stories. The last two videos have essentially no interactions, so I guess people either don't like them or they just don't comment on them. And so, I mean, if you're enjoying this and not commenting, that's fine too. But I want to do a third section. I'm going to try to do these more rapid fire though, because maybe one thing that people don't like is how long the video is. And short stories are just not really in vogue anyways with like the speculative fiction community, even though that shouldn't be the case. I like reading short stories a lot. So anyways, the first one is The Hound by H.P. Lovecraft, from written 1922, published 1924. It is a Lovecraft story about a hound. That's all I have to say. The Bargain by Elaine Cunningham, from 1993, from the Realms of Valor, Forgotten Realms anthology. It is about Danilo and Erilyn, I believe. It's that Harper duo. It actually takes place in between book one. It's like Songs and Swords or something. I think is the name of that series. I haven't read it yet. It's by Elaine Cunningham, of course. It takes place in between book one and two. So, if anyone likes that series, you might want to read that short story. If you haven't, I enjoyed it. I have enjoyed every short story I've read by Cunningham. I just haven't read any of her Forgotten Realms novels. I read one EverQuest novel by her. Then Together Under the Wing by Jonathan Olfert, from 2023. This is from Old Moon Quarterly issue 5, which came out recently, August or September or something like that. And this is the first story in the collection. And while I overall really enjoyed the collection, this is my least favorite story in the collection. Now, it didn't work for me, but it might work for you. The editors described it kind of as a Cole story, Cole the Conqueror vein of Sword and Sorcery, and it is. It's less Conan, more Cole, right? But it's also about mammoths. It's about the characters are mammoths, which I just was not in the mood for at all. I like Spear and Fane type stories. I was just not in the mood for mammoth characters. Maybe you wouldn't mind. Maybe that even sounds cool. And I like John. He's a nice guy, actually. I've talked to him, so I know nothing against him. And then Champions Against the Maggot King by K.H. Vaughn, same collection of Old Moon Quarterly 5. This one is very enjoyable, I thought. Very much not that Cole, if I'm remembering correctly. Then this also from the same collection, The Origin of Boghounds by Amelia Gorman, I believe. Unless I misspelled that. So this one is very interesting and kind of creepy. It's almost Lovecraftian, but it doesn't have nearly the same tone as Lovecraft. And it's an interesting rivalry and just like this weird, what these boghounds are. They look like dogs essentially, but they're not quite dogs. And then I read Seed by DJ Butler, which is originally from 2013, but I read it in his collection of short stories put out by Hemmeline Press, which is the Florilegium of Madness, I believe. And this was a very weird story. It is very erotic, but very creepy, very horror sci-fi. Very interesting. The little like intro note that he gives for this story is that this is like the first story I wrote that offended people, which is interesting. Yeah, it's really weird. This one's kind of Lovecraftian as well. It's horror, and again, like I said, it's kind of erotic. Look at like Garden of Eden type thing. It's very interesting. And then I read One Hive, Two Queens by S.E. Lindberg. I think this is in the Terra Incognita anthology by DMR, if I remember correctly. It's from 2022, and I believe that came out in 2022. I had been slowly reading through this. I meant to get through it quicker, but I haven't. So I read one story further since my short story readings of September and October. So that one's kind of interesting. It's kind of deals with arrogance and kind of like a return to nature. It's very creepy, weird tale nature, right? So if that sounds like your thing, that it'd probably work. It's about golems, kind of as main character. So there's the two queens there, if I'm remembering correctly. And then I read The Ink of the Slime Lord by Jason Ray Carney in 2020, unless they were previously published. But I actually have this collection still out. It's Rakefire and other stories. I really enjoyed it. I like Carney's style a lot, actually, in a lot of ways. I haven't read very much by him, which is why I got this. This is only the first story in here, and his vibe, his style is one of my favorites of like contemporary sword and sorcery. And I'd like to read through the rest of these and then potentially do a review for it. But I didn't make notes for the Ink of the Slime Lord, so maybe I need to do that. if I want to do a review for this. But I really enjoyed it. If you want some good contemporary sword and sorcery, check out Jason Ray Carney. This collection is actually kind of hard to get a hold of, but you can read some of his stories on like the Cromcast Chronicle, I believe, his rogue stories. You can really read one of those in each one, I think. So, and then I read Well Met at the Gates of Hell by David K. Henrickson, which is also an Old Moon Quarterly #5, I believe. This one is interesting. I liked it. In some ways, it's funny because, like, looking back now, it's been closer to a month since I've read these. I don't remember much about this one. I remember enjoying it, but I don't remember much, right? And then the next one is Patronage by David Cook from 1993, again, also from Realms of Valor. I also don't remember much of this one. David Cook is a good author, though. I think he's worthwhile. I believe this one probably ties in to another one of his novels. I'd have to look, but I'm not 100% sure on that, which, just speaks for itself, right? A Virtue by Reflection by Scott Cienson. I believe one of these stories in that collection is from the point of view of Adon, who is from the Avatar series or saga of Forgotten Realms novels. So A Virtue by Reflection, I can't remember if that one's it. And I realize that this is kind of the point of this, is to kind of get you an idea of maybe what stories are worthwhile. And I like Forgotten Realms stories in a nutshell, but you can kind of tell maybe which ones are more memorable than others. God Killer by Cliff Biggers from 2021 is in Blood on the Sword. Is that what it is? It's a collection. Let me look it up. Blood on the Spear. That kind of sounds right. See, no, it's maybe a little intermission here. Blood on the Blade. That's what it is. Blood on the Sword, Blood on the Spear. I couldn't get it. Blood on the Blade came out in 2021, I believe, at the end of the year. This is a nice little intro story. It's rather short. If you want a good anthology of sword and sorcery tales, that might be one of them. There's a good amount these days. So I like this one. It is called God Killer for a reason. If you like the sound of that, then maybe check it out. Then I read Law and Order by Dave Gross from 2019. I wouldn't be surprised if this story was written well before 2019. It is essentially a vignette of a Baldur's Gate character from the first Baldur's Gate game. Oh man, what's his name? He's a monk from Kalimport. Rasad or something like that. I made a post about it actually on my blog already, but this is an interesting one. It's kind of in two parts, about being a thief on the streets and then about being a monk, a young monk at this monastery. And it's interesting. I am not that familiar with the Baldur's Gate games, so but I enjoyed the story. I really enjoyed like kind of vignettes. You get this idea of this character. And then I read King's Tear by Mark Anthony, also in Realms of Valor. And this one is interesting because it kind of deals with like artifacts. I believe it takes place near the Sunset Mountains, which is a place that doesn't get a bunch of attention normally. And it's pretty interesting. Mark Anthony actually almost, if I'm remembering, I think it was him that almost wrote a Drizzt novel. In fact, he did write a Drizzt novel, and it almost got published. There was even like cover art out for it and everything. But then R.A. Salvatore decided to come back to Drizzt, and this was during the 90s, I believe. So, yeah, Mark Anthony and King's Tear. And then The Skulls of Ghost by Charles Gromwich, also from 2023. I believe this one is also an Old Moon Quarterly #5. And yeah, this is an interesting one. Basically, if you're going to want a good magazine, I don't have much to say on the story itself, but if you want a good magazine to try out, that's not free. If you want, like, Whetstone's free, right? But Old Moon Quarterly, it's not expensive. It's a magazine. It's a good one. It's worth checking out. It's got good quality stories, and they very much go for like a dark fantasy vibe. Even like they do sword and sorcery, right? But it very much, I feel like, has its own vibe. Already, even though they've only done 5 issues. I've read all of them, and so they're worthwhile. And the issues keep on getting thicker and more well done. So in some ways, well, I'm not saying the stories are better in each issue, but the editing and stuff like that is better. And then the next 3 stories, I'll just quickly go over these because I'm not sure where you can read these, or, well, you probably can't read them anywhere right now, but soon. I read The Pay of Electronic Dan, The Profit of Electronic Dan, and The Financial Returns to Electronic Dan, all by Jeremy Fee, who's, of course, a BookTube legend. These are references. These titles are references. It's a trilogy of short stories, essentially, but they're all references to the Adan trilogy, if you would. But it's like absurd comic cyberpunk, like Wave of Dawn stuff. And there's a character in there that's a philologist, which is awesome. So these are very entertaining stories that are, again, they do meet the cyberpunk criteria, I'd say, and they're very well done. They're very comic. I can't remember the last time I laughed so much at a set of stories. So those 3, I think you might be able to read one of those soon. The first one, at least. I'm not sure. So we shall see. And then I'm getting near the end here. The Hill in the Hole by Fritz Leiber is a 1942 story. So it's early Fritz Leiber, which, if you know Fritz Leiber, then that means you're able to guess what genre this is. It is a horror short story. And it's actually quite good. It's pretty straightforward. There is a hill, and this surveyor, if I'm remembering correctly, is basically can't get the right measurement on this hill. Turns out, same thing happened a couple years ago. And why? Well, there's something supernatural going on with this hill. Now, everyone sees a hill, but the farmer's daughter, who the property the hill's on, it's this farmer and his daughter. This daughter says it's not a hill. She says it's a hole, and there's like skeletons or something that live in it, like living, monsters. And yeah, it's got a kind of like a terminal climax, like a Lovecraftian type of thing. I think it works rather well, to be honest. It's shorter than a lot of Lovecraft stuff, which maybe is why I think it works well. But Leiber he's a good horror author, and you should read it if you're interested. So I like that one a lot. And another horror one is Blood by Steve Diamond. I believe this is the one that mentions like Hastur's Hounds, if I'm remembering correctly, and it has to deal with family drama of sorts. It's interesting twist. It came out in 2016. I believe it actually got nominated for Hugo Awards. So I believe it came out in. You can read it in like What Hellhounds Dream or something like that. I can never remember what the name of the collection is, but Steve Diamond, if you look up like Hellhound Steve Diamond. But it came out in a Bane anthology originally. I don't remember what that was called. And then you have Opium for Ezra by T.R. Napper from 2018. Opium for Ezra is pretty good. It is kind of about reality and memory. And it's very much cyberpunk. And so I think it's worthwhile. I read it in Neon Leviathan, which is Napper's collection of cyberpunk short stories. Originally was in some magazine. I don't remember which one, but yeah, anything T.R. Napper is good. I'm looking forward to reading the T.R. Napper story in the Big Book of Cyberpunk. And then I read The Headman's Melancholy by Joseph Andre Thomas. This is a one also. There's one also in Old Moon Quarterly number 5, and this is the final story in that collection, and it is really good. Like I would recommend that collection just for that story. Probably that was probably my favorite in the collection. It's written, if I remember correctly, as a journal essentially, and as this journal just kind of progresses, it's a headman who ends up killing the same person twice, and that person is not super happy about that. And it's cheeky, dark. You should read it. Yeah. And then also The Folk of the Forest by Michael Moorcock. That's 2023. It's not out yet, actually, I should say. I've been reading New Edge Sword and Sorcery, and I put all those short stories in this list, even though I'm doing separate reviews for New Edge Sword and Sorcery. But if you're not going to watch those reviews, The Folk of the Forest is a new Elric story. It is a prequel, I'm probably safe to say. So in it's a good place to start if you've never read any Elric, but it also is a good place to explore if you are very familiar with Elric, because it's something we've never seen before. It takes place Elric as a teenager when he's still living in Imrir. So Not my favorite Elric story by far, but it was really cool to read. I mean, of course, it's Elric, classic at this point. So, and then The Family Business by James Lowder is from 1993. And I'll just mention the last one as well, The Grandfather's Toys by Gene Robb, also 1993, because they're both from Realms of Valor. And I like Gene Robb as an author, and I like James Lowder as an author. And they are kind of, let's see. I'm going to pull up my notes so I can give you better. The collection was actually edited by James Lowder, if I'm remembering correctly. So James Lowder also wrote a novel called The Ring of Winter, which showed up in a 5th edition adventure, Storm King's Thunder, if I'm remembering correctly. If I remember correctly, it might have showed up in Tomb of Annihilation as well. I'm not 100% sure. But essentially, this is the same thing. Artist Cimber, he is the main character of this, but he's young. He's a young Artist Cimber. So it takes place in Cormyr, and Azun plays a role in it as well. It's an interesting tale of assassins and stuff. The Grandfather's Toys deals with a druid named Galvin. This one is kind of about an old tower and a little girl. This one wasn't as entertaining. I'm not sure if it connects to any of Rob's novels, like Red Magic, for example. But it's kind of a tale of like shapeshifting and saving a child, and how dangerous that turns out to be when it doesn't seem very serious at first. So, anyways, those are the 25 stories. I realize I didn't go into too much depth about some of them sometimes. But again, if you need any information on how to find these, I will probably be doing a couple more of these videos still, even though no one asked. It's a weird dynamic. I'm getting rambly here, I know, but there's videos I want to do, but a lot of these videos I want to do, I feel like I need to do a lot more research before I can do them, and I haven't done the research yet. So hopefully those will come out eventually, but I don't want to be wrong, if that makes sense. Anyways, but I'm wrong all the time, aren't I? So I'll catch you next time.